All right. Good day, class. Hopefully everybody had a good week and weekend. All right, we're in week 7. So pretty much coming to the conclusion of the session. All right. So with that said, hopefully going to turn in your group case study by Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Okay, you caught up on all your other assignments as far as the LE, title justification, all that stuff is in and graded. So one more week, so let's finish up strong and get this class over with. Okay, so this week we're looking into sports analytics and some other things related to that. And so, as far as analytics go in sports, it's now become a major tool for a lot of management and administration individuals to use to analyze and to evaluate players, right? Evaluate the team and see, what kind of success are we having? And really the aim is to try to see if we can predict success with understanding the components that we put into our model, okay? And so, of course, in order to analyze anything, you have to collect data, okay? And so when you're collecting data, you have your primary, secondary data. Primary data is data that you collect yourself, for a specific reason that you have, such as a, project or whatever the case may be. Secondary data is data that someone else has collected for possibly another research topic, or something else that's related to what you're looking at, and you're going to use that data instead, right? So Department of Labor may have statistics on how many athletes there are, that play professionally, something to that effect, right? It's not something you collected yourself, okay? All right, you have to analyze the data, of course, after you collect it, all right? And this is where, it really, you have to find the professionals, the statisticians, the actuaries, guys that understand the statistics and kind of can help, translate that into layman terms so you understand like what it is that you're looking at, okay? And then you have to communicate the results, right? You have to put it in a presentable fashion so that people that aren't statistician and aren't actuaries and don't understand necessarily the math or the stuff behind it, they understand the numbers and what did the numbers translate into, right? Do the numbers translate into us getting, more money? Does it translate to us trading someone? Does it translate to us moving a lineup around, right? So there's a couple of different implications with that, right? So here's some software and also some tools that we use in the research field, right? Basically, let's start with the statistics programs. R, which is, basically a programming language that is used to conduct statistics and to do data queries, okay? SPSS, strictly statistics, helps you, evaluate regression, ANOVAs, anything statistical, you can do an SPSS created by IBM, and it's probably going to be the main statistical tool that you see that you'll use at this level, okay? There's a stat, there's Stata, there's JMP. So it all depends on, what you're doing and who you're working for, what it is their research really is supporting, okay? Some of the software data, CRM applications, you have Excel, which we're familiar with, Tableau, okay, Power BI's, Power Intelligence, right, Salesforce and Ticketmaster. All these are all platforms that can help you visualize the data. Once you have it, analyze it, but also help you visualize the data, okay? You got Python, SQL, which is structured query language, and you have MS Excel. There's, again, Python is, and SQL are both programming languages that you can use to do a variety of things. One of them is statistical analysis, okay? SQL is specifically designed for data management, data wrangling, just analyzing data in general, right? Different statistical techniques, as I talked about. I'm not going to get too much into all this stuff. We have regression, ANOVAs, Monte Carlo simulations, and we have AI, of course, at the bottom, which goes in line with Python and SQL. All right, and most of these have what we're trying to do is build a model or predict what will maybe happen, or decide what components or what elements contribute to an outcome. And we also have a time series, which is the Monte Carlo simulations, to take the aspect of time and how time impacts a certain situation or outcome. Okay, so different stuff out there that you'll get into if you jump into sports analysis, sports analytics, and that kind of thing. Okay, here we have the MLB's Pythagorean win percentage expectation, created by Bill James. I think there was a movie about how the Oakland A's and how they use statistics to kind of pick out their players and make their team, and how they did it in an efficient and cost-effective way, and it was really good, effective, and got them pretty far within their division, right? Excuse me, in their league. So the top part, the PF2, is the percentage, is the number of points scored divided by the number of points scored plus the number of scored points allowed, right? So he's going to square those things and then divide, and then you will get a certain percentage, and it will tell you whether or not how well your team does, and what's the likelihood of your team beating other team based on how many points they scored. All right. And so we know we score this much, and this is how much we typically allow. So if we know we score this much points, and this is how many points we allow, every team that goes above that particular parameter, we should be more concerned about, right? If we have a team that is below the percentage or below the amount that we normally allow, then we say, okay, we got a good chance of winning that game. So we'll count that as a plus. So we expect to win 80% of our games based on this, or whatever the case may be. We all know that's just not the only thing that goes into it, but it gives you an idea, an estimation of, what teams you should beat, what teams you shouldn't beat, and that kind of thing, right? All right, so jumping to regression, describe the relation between one or more dependent and one or more independent variables, right? Regression is just basically we're building a model, and within that model, we have different elements and components, and those components, all together equal out some outcome, okay? And so, we try to figure out what's the best model, right? There's going to school plus, experience plus, worldwide exposure. Does that equal successful executive? Does that equal successful CEO, right? So it's something to that effect. And then in each component, we have an ability to evaluate what its contribution is. So we could say that, having a degree contributes to 50% of the particular outcome, whatever the outcome is. The outcome could, be, 95%, but out of that 95%, we can say 50% is accounted for by education, okay? And so that's a big chunk of the model, and we understand that that's important, so we'll emphasize that particular thing, right? And we can also see components or elements that are not as essential, not as important, they don't contribute as much, and we can take those out, or maybe smooth them around, and maybe the position matters, right, as to where we put it, right? And this is getting more into the statistical analysis of doing stepwise analysis, or you're doing list-wise analysis. There's a couple of different things you can do when it comes to the stats. So we're not going to get into much into that. All right. Bayes rule, okay, Bayes theorem. Basically, Bayes theorem is just is the formula that we use, or the theorem that we use, that it helps us with probability. Okay, we're trying to figure out what is the chances of a certain thing happening. Okay, and then within the Bayes theorem or the Bayes rule, we have to take into account events that happened before and how they impact the events that are happening after. And we also get to analyze the events that happen after, and how if maybe we can, tweak that, and what effect does it have on the things that happened before, right? So Bayes' rule is really about probability and trying to figure out, okay, what's the likelihood of something occurring, okay? Again, nothing you're gonna jump into, now, unless you take stats. I'm sure you will have to at some point take statistics. You'll run into Bayes theorem, Bayes rules at a very, minor level. All right. So, when you basically have your analysis or your statistical analysis, you can really start to get a picture of the demographic. You can really start to get understanding of the consumer and what they're purchasing and buying habits are? What are their values? What it is that they find important? Okay, what relationships do they have linked together, right? Is summertime linked to increased sales ticket? Is the holidays increased sales ticket? Spring break, do I see changes in how, people react and, that kind of thing, right? Like Super Bowl is coming up, or, and so do we see an uptick in certain things, right? Okay, we know that during Super Bowl, commercials, are the thing, okay? So you'll see a lot of new commercials, companies are trying out new marketing approaches, right? We know those things are happening. So, but all that is derived from the research that we did prior to, okay? All right. Nowadays we have, machine learning, right? Unstructured data analysis, right? Which really helps us to kind of get a different understanding of the consumer, right? It's no longer just straight up like we got numbers and they're all pretty and they're all uniform and they all look the same. Now we're taking disparate pieces of information, unstructured information, basically, information that, maybe data that may be missing values, or values aren't, put in the same way, or, something may be a word vice an actual number. All those things matter when it comes down to, using a programming language, because again, when it comes to programming and, AI and algorithms, it's mostly all zeros and ones, right? And trying to figure out how do I change, some categorical information, right, into or qualitative information into something quantitative, but specifically zeros and ones, so that the program, the computer, understands what is I'm trying to get out of it. Okay. So for the importance of the sports analytics, is part of it for managers. They do play evaluations, right? And they do they value people when it comes down to the draft, and you look at their college career or look at their high school career and look at their injuries and that kind of thing, right? Timeout from playing, how long have they been playing, how many points did they score, what's their their plus minus when they're on the court as being off the court, right? All those numbers are now important and applicable when it comes down to making decisions about players to draft and who to keep and how to reward people and that kind of thing, right? So important tool for managers. For coaches, a little different, right? Coaches are looking at very specific things to help you with your mechanics, right? Help you develop as a player, right? As an individual. So the analytics that, coach may look at are different. Coaches may look at more image segmentation type data, where they're doing, analysis of your body mechanics, right? Have that software that looks at, your motion and how you move, things that look at your shooting, right? If you're a basketball player, I know we had machines that, analyze your shot from the time you got the ball to the time you squared up to the basket. You took your shot, it follows you all the way through, and then you do a series of drills, and that would, collect the data and tell you how well you were doing, or how, what deficiencies you had in your, in your mechanics, in your form, in order so that we could fix it, right? So that's what is important for coaches. For, for sports business, it really is important because I'm trying to build a connection with the customer. And the only way I can do that is to have to know the customer. And so that's why it's really critical and important that, we get data from our customers. We get, fan engagement. We ask them questions, maybe one or two here and then 3 or 4 later on. You kind of break it up a little bit so they don't even realize like they're doing a survey, sort of, right? But we're trying to get an understanding of what's going on, right? But we're trying to get an understanding of pricing, right? To see what price point will be too much to where people will not, come and play the games or watch the games, right? So all that you have to keep in mind, okay? There's Google Analytics, Google Trends, social media analytics. So there's a couple of different ways in which you can approach it. Social media analytics, of course, is a little different because now we're just looking at, what is the interaction via social media between the the organization and the consumer, right? And so we're trying to see, is social media a better platform in which to advertise, market our money, our team, or should we just stick with, radio, TV, or should it be a hybrid, a mix of both, right? So it all depends, right? So here we have NHL in-game win probabilities, okay? And just another way in which we can depict, game progression win probabilities, right? Again, home team win probability, okay? And then we have, let's see, home team win, 15 games, 50% looks like here, right? A home win team probability. Home team win probability from team goals scored, right? The likelihoods of us winning is a little bit over 60, okay? When home team goal allowed, right? What's the chances of us winning? Boom. Depending right here, I know you can't see me, I know, but this just gives an idea of, okay, if we, in general, what's the probability of us winning our home game, excuse me. What's the probability of us winning the game if we score? What's the probability of us winning the game if the other team scores, right? And so you get kind of different aspects, right? And then minutes from the start of the game, and you kind of get, you have your X and Y axis, and you compare those two, right? And so, if it's 10 minutes in, boom, this is what would happen. 20 minutes in, 30 minutes in, 40 minutes in, what's the likelihood of us, winning the game based on those time hacks, and whether or not the team scored a goal or allowed a goal. Right? Same thing, basketball lineup, different, player stats, okay? And, if you ever watch a game, these things are getting compiled by the minute, right? They're compiling data, and they have it ready to go for each player, right? Because it's a piece of software, so it has it all laid out already. It's just a matter of understanding what the output is. Notice you can talk about it and incorporate it into your analysis, right? Commentary that they have, that is supported by statistics. Some commentators are a little bit more, analytical. Others are more, color commentary, where they're offering more of their expertise because they understand and they've been in a position before, whether or not they play professional sports. Others, have not played professional sports, but they understand the analytics and they understand that they played at a lower level and understand how some of it feels, okay? Look at social media and sports analytics, right? We're looking at, what is, really the importance of social media and how can we leverage it in order to be successful and have a good relationship with the consumer, right? Trying to get the consumers to stay engaged and to understand that they will always hear, you just need to reach out to us and we will, give you as much information as we can, try to allow as much time as we can, for you to really, get immersed in the team, this team, data, this team analytics. You can see your favorite player, how they're doing. You can chat, there's different platforms, different approaches they have for social media, and it's become a big deal, right? All right. Let me see here. I wanted to do that. Okay. So critical learning in sports and analytics. Okay. High content team use a 3-step approach to sport analytics to determine the variable ticket price for each game, right? Of course, you got to collect historical ticket sales, right? Again, you got to go back to the data, collect the information, right? You create a model based on the data, all right? And then once you've done that, you create, a report. But the report, is going to have different things in it that are going to have to be translated, right? So for me, if I was doing this analysis, right, I would probably create some kind of confidence interval, for, the ticket prices, right? And say from this range to this range, I think this many percentage of people will buy. I think this range to this range, certain people will buy, this percentage of people will buy. This range, this price range, certain people, percentage of people will buy tickets, right? And then also have just in general what I think the likely ticket sales would be, based, of course, on historical data, right? So that's really how it goes, right? You have to look at the past in order to try to figure out what the present's going to look like or the future. All right. When you're doing research, you always want to be ethical, right? And make sure you do ethical work and not have any biases in your work, right? The key thing about research is that once you've done the research and you've laid out, your research methods, anyone should be able to pick that up. Any researcher should be able to pick that up and follow your recipe, you follow your layout, and be able to get the same results, okay, based on how you did it. All right. If you can't do that, then something's wrong, right? Your research is off. There's some kind of issue that we need to resolve, right? As a researcher, that's probably one of the most important things, the ability to replicate the results based on the method that was used in the primary research, okay? And so everything needs to be ethical, upfront, no bias, try to keep your prejudices out of it. Don't fall in love with your hypothesis. Okay, yes, you can have a hypothesis, but the point of doing the research is to figure out whether your hypothesis is true or not, all right? Whether it's supported or not. So if it's not supported and the data shows that it's not supported, then you have to go with that. You have to report that and say, okay, well, I thought it was going to be this. Didn't turn out to be this, but it turned out to be this. So maybe we can look at things from a different angle. All right, so with the research being done, we kind of jump into the presentation piece, right? And the presentation piece is really about the communication aspect. Okay, it's about being able to take all that kind of mumbo jumbo that most people don't get and put it into something that they understand. Okay, so sports communication now, well, back in the day, really was about radio, TV, newspaper, right? Really radio and newspaper, right? And unless the people went to the game, then that was something different. But nowadays, sports communication is in a whole new world of different aspects, right? Different mediums, right? You can listen to it on talk radio. You can listen to it on any of your streaming networks, as far as Tidal or iTunes or iHeartRadio or any other Audible, any other platform. You can now listen to or hear your sports, right? Whatever team it is, internationally, right? Globally, it doesn't matter, right? As long as you have the internet, you're good to go. Okay. But within that, particular, realm of communication, there's different, frameworks. Okay. So we're going to look at some of the frameworks here, the genres, the context, process, elements, and effects. Okay. So some of the elements in the communication process, right? We have the sender, okay? The message, the channel through which the message is delivered, and the receiver. Now, this particular, these elements right here are elements that are in communication in general, okay? In general, when you talk about communication, you have somebody who's speaking, you have someone who's listening, you have a mode of communication, right? Whether that be the phone, texting, letter, something to that effect, right? Then you have the receiver, right? The sender message, the channel to which the receiver, right? Who's getting the message? Your audience. Do you understand who you're writing to and what it is that you are writing about? Okay. So some communication models. Shannon and Weaver in 1949 added encoding and decoding to the process, right? Of course, we understand encoding is encrypting or making it giving the communication element of privacy, secrecy, right? And then putting into a format that you need a key for, right? In order to decode it. Okay. Schramm, 1954, added the element of feedback and argued that for communication to exist, the sender and receiver share a common language, vocabulary, interest in or understanding of the subject. All right. So of course, if you want to communicate with somebody, you have to understand, there has to be a mutual language that we both agree with, that, okay, yes, we both know how to speak this language. We both understand the words within that language, and now we can communicate and come to some agreement or disagreement, whatever the case may be. But there has to be some common ground, right? And this is why, it's the language barrier is an important aspect of communication, right? Sports a little different, right? But at the same time, you still need some communication in which to really help athletes and coaches and those those guys really do their job well. Okay. And so, you'll have foreign players who don't necessarily speak the language, but are going to play the game in a different place. But because they have a common understanding of the rules of the game, and the game is the game, they can make it through, right? And then maybe they have a translator, somebody else that can, speak to more of the analytics and some more of the, coaching stuff when it boils down to, mechanics and tweaking of, form and technique and that kind of thing, right? But all in all, having that common language and common understanding of that particular sport is what gets, a lot of teams through that have international players that don't necessarily speak the same language. All right. So you get varied results of communication to audience members and society in general. Okay. Theories of mass media effects, users and gratification, agenda setting, innovation, diffusion of information, modeling, and cultivation, right? So when we talk about, the theories of mass media and their effects on society, we're really trying to figure out what's the impact of mass media on people, right? And you have different, things that it does for people, okay? Social media has one thing that it does for its particular consumer as compared to TV or radio or newspaper, right? There's different ways in which you can use mass media to, lower your costs, but still get outreach, okay? Be able to disseminate information to a large group of people quickly, right? And also you can model or tailor your particular message to a certain group of folks, right? I can, really, like it says, model it or cultivate it to where, I'm putting out positive information about my team or about a player. I'm trying to, create the narrative or create the story around this person, right? And that could all be done by mass media. And that's what mass media has an effect of, molding people, right? Of getting people to think in a certain way, right? Of kind of not just say transforming them, but really, getting to see things kind of your way, okay? All right, let's get this, okay. Strategic sport communication model, right, provides a framework for interaction between communication dynamics and settings. The elements are sports communication process, personnel and organizational communication in sports mass media, sports communication services, and support, right? And so when we talk about the model, we're really referring to the different ways in which we communicate, all right? And the times we communicate, and how we communicate, and who we communicate with, right? If you look at, let's just say ESPN, right? That's the biggest sports network that, that I know of, okay? ESPN, has multiple shows 24/7 going, communicating different things, right? They have different shows for different sports. We have, they have shows that cover all sports in general. They have shows that provide insight into the athletes' lives, and some of the things that you may not have been aware of. Let's say, they have on ESPN, they have 30-30, 30 for 30 or whatever the case may be, or they have, behind the lines, or outside the lines, excuse me. They have different shows that they, use in which to, get in contact or portray certain elements of sports that you probably don't see all the time, right? Because they happen inside the locker room or the club room, right? They, it's not for public consumption till after it's occurred, and those teams have, gone through whatever they've gone through. And now you get a perspective that you're not going to get just by going to the game or just by listening to the game, right? You get this other side of it, right? And so, sports media or mass media has become a big industry, right? When you see many commentators, former athletes kind of roll into the booth and do, sports commentating, and try to, give some insight as to, how the games are played and kind of thing, right? We think about Tom Brady now, who's, retired and going into, the booth, who has a $350 million 10-year deal with Fox Sports, I believe, right? He's going to roll into the booth, right? And he's so valuable because of the vast amount of knowledge and information he has about football, being a quarterback, and not only that, being a champion quarterback many times over, right? He's excelled at the highest levels, in the highest of, organizations, okay? The epitome of football is the NFL, and Tom Brady is at the top of that particular pyramid, right? He's at the top of is at the apex. And so his insight is important. His insight is valuable because he's seen a number of things that can, add value for the consumer, okay? All right, so when we look at the sport communication models of visual depiction, okay? So the communication process, you can see it's a big feedback loop, right? It goes into one thing, goes out the other, right? But component one, personalization of communication in sport. Component two, media communication in sport. And 3 is sport community services, sports communication services and support, right? And so you can see where they all feed into each other in sort of a way, right? Where, the personal communication, interpersonal, small group, organization communication, right? The internal stuff, right? Is kind of feeding into the external stuff and support piece, right? But then they feed back into the personal organizational communication support. So it's just a big feedback loop that feeds into each other and supports each other, right? So look at component one, personal sport communication, interpersonal small groups, right? We're really talking about the teams, right? And talking about how do we talk to each other internally, right? How do managers talk to the teams, to the players? How do the players talk to each other? How does, leadership communicate down to managers? How does leadership communicate with the players itself? Then we get into, component two, where we have, how the organization externally, communicates with the public, right? Whether it doesn't matter. If you're outside the organization, you fall into media communication or component two, right? Talking to the news outlets, the sports outlets, the newspapers, the radio outlets, the social media outlets, right? How do we, what do we publish as far as visual communication, right? Pamphlets, brochures, booklets, videos, all that stuff, snippets, Twitter, Instagram, all those things are all media communication, okay? And then you have component three, where you have marketing communication, public relations, and crisis communication, and just plain old research, right? How do we take all these different components, put them all together, and deliver a communications package, right? Or communications or a marketing or advertising campaign, right? How do we handle crisis situations, right? How do we handle issues like Deshaun Watson, or people that, have maybe, going through something like Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire, when we went through, Sammy Sosa went through the whole PED or performance enhancing drugs, right? And how that affected baseball, right? How we looked at, Aaron Judge and him, breaking the home run record and that kind of thing, right? And so, all those things, positive and negative, there's a public relation aspect to it, right? There's an image aspect to it, okay? And so we want to make sure that the correct image gets communicated to the public, right? The correct story or whatever story it is that we're trying to make sure gets conveyed, right? And then there's just research. All right, so models of public relations practice, right? One-way models and two-way models, right? Of course, one-way models are, hey, it's going in one direction. Either the organization is talking to the media, right? Then that's it. Or the media is talking to the organization, but there's no dialogue, okay? Two-way models are different, where I can send and I can also receive, right? Send, receive, there's a dialogue. There's going back and forth where there's two ways, there's two open lines of communication, really, right? The organization talking to the public, talking to the media, whoever, and then the media gets to also say, hey, we are looking at this, or we're thinking about that, or whatever the case may be, okay? Media relations specialists, they write news articles, they plan news conferences, they manage game services. And so when it comes to media relations, it's really about, creating a nice, good relationship, healthy relationship with the press, all right, with, the news, the sports writers, all right, to make sure that they understand, okay, after the game, we're having a press conference and you have 5 minutes, to ask certain questions, and certain people are going to come out. Like, who is it that you want to speak to, right? We may talk to the main people, right? The quarterback, the coaches, right? But then after that, we may want to talk to or speak to the person or hear from the person that maybe scored the most points, or maybe had, the game-winning shot or something to that effect, right? Or played, had an interception or played this great defense, whatever the case may be, right? We want to make sure that, we give the media access to those folks so that they can highlight and be used as a marketing tool, right? And that we bring, kind of recognition to the team, okay? All right, so when you talk about community relations in sports, we're really talking about how the organization interacts with the community, okay? What are we giving back to the community that we're in, right? And so we may, have communication that tell the community, hey, we're doing, camps for free for kids a certain age. We're handing out books and book bags, right? We're doing a fun driver, like a car wash, or, golf tournament, right? So we're doing, community outreach. And that really is what, community relations is about integrating and ingratiating yourself into the community so that the people know who you are, they understand the organization, they feel, a sense of attachment or loyalty to the organization, and they will be supportive of the organization, okay? Various positions, various PR or public relations positions, corporate communications, employee and volunteer relations, digital media manager, things of that nature. And folks, do well when they are social media managers, especially those that are really well versed in Twitter and Snapchat and Instagram, and know how to use those particular platforms in which you get the not the athlete, but the spectators, right, involved in what's going on, right? And let's talk some finance and economics in sports, right? So we've been talking about money and economics and how sports impacts that, right? But we want to make sure that we have a good understanding of really what does sports bring to a community or bring to a city economically, right? Financially, okay? When does it become no longer prudent or economical for us to have a team, okay? And to, support a team, right? Cities, city governments, local governments have to, really analyze the economic impact of teams that are in their area in order to assess whether or not they should be contributing to the team's growth, right? And understanding that, the team just can't function on its own because the team is supported by the community, right? That's where the dollars come from. But and also that the team needs support from the local government, okay? Maybe in subsidies, right? Maybe we want to build a new stadium. City, San Diego, we need you to contribute $2-3 million to, this particular endeavor, because we bring people to here. People come watch sports and they enjoy the sports and they enjoy having a team here. And so we need some incentive to keep the team here, okay? All right, so when we're looking at, measuring economic size of sports industry susceptibility to fluctuation in global economy, and then growth and contraction of the sport industry, okay? So here comes some economic activity that selected sports industries, okay? Sales, went into the skiing, almost 3 billion, full-time employees, 76,000, or almost 77,000. Golf courses and country clubs, 23 billion. 305,000 people. Fitness and recreational sports facilities, which make up the bulk of what most people are really involved in when it comes to athletics. They're in 24-hour fitness, LA Fitness, EO Sports, right? You know, wherever, Planet Fitness, that falls in that category, okay? Professional sports teams and clubs, right? 34 billion. Racetracks, agents and managers and that kind of thing, earning for artists, athletes, and public figures, $7.87 billion, right? So there's a lot of money out there, okay? There's a lot of money out there in each particular segment or area of sports, you know, contributes a different value, different economic boost to a particular community, okay? Let's look at the current financial situation of U.S. pro team, okay? You have to look at the growth of the segment, okay? When we say growth of segment, we're looking at each individual area, sport, or, you know, demographic and saying, okay, we see there's a growth, you know, an increased interest in soccer, right? And so maybe we need to start putting more money into that. Maybe we need to start putting more parks and more access to that sport, right? Goals and that kind of thing. You see that bigger fields that people can just play recreationally whenever they feel like it, okay? Yeah, financial problems and recovery. How do we recoup monies from poor decision-making, right? And poor investments, okay? How do we go about trying to make those things up? Bad contracts that we've made, bad deals on people that we thought were going to do well, right? Revenue sharing, okay? How does that work, right? Who gets a piece of the ultimate pie, okay? Media impact and revenue sources, right? Again, we're looking for sponsorships. We're looking for, you know, ways in which to make money, okay? And of course, profitability. The profit is always total revenues minus total cost, right? That's the end of the day, that's what gives you profit, right? Only two ways to make more money. Either you make more money because you have more revenue, or you lower cost. That's it, because that's the formula it goes into, right? It goes into making profit, right? And then controlling spending, right? You know, you always want to make sure that you have an idea as to how much is being spent or how much is estimated to be spent. You don't want people going overboard in their budgets and spending money furiously, you know, for overtime and things that are not necessary, right? Spending $1,000, $2,000, or however much money on a hotel room a night for a particular athlete or athletes is not probably economical. Doesn't make any sense, right? Wanting, we already charter flights, right? Maybe we just buy a plane, right? And that moves the team, and then we just retrofitted, or we, updated every, 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years, we update and retrofit the plane so it has everything that we need for our team, right? Because we don't necessarily need the whole plane, right? But we probably need at least, 200 seats, give or take, I would say, right? For a football team. Basketball team is a little different, right? But it's better just to have maybe our own plane, right? Instead of charting a flight every game, right? Especially you have like a baseball season at 100 and some odd games, right? NBA 82 games. That's a lot of traveling for a team, okay? And it's very expensive if you don't have your own assets, okay? Costs are rising, of course, inflation, just the cost of living. And so with that, it makes sense that the cost of playing sports and having, college athletics, it's a little more, it's more pricey, right? So you see tuition go up, you'll see gate prices go up, right? Most programs cost, and like I said before in the previous slides, football and basketball are the primary revenue earners for most college teams, most college or universities, right? And so those two programs fund pretty much all the other programs, right? From hockey to lacrosse, to tennis, to gymnastics, to track and field. Basketball and football cover a large percentage of the other sports. So it's important that if schools want to really have a robust program, that they have good foundationally sound basketball and football programs. Okay. The need to increase revenues has resulted from rising costs, which we understand, right? Largest single source of revenue in college athletics is the annual men's basketball championship, right? When we do March Madness and that kind of thing, that's where we bring in the most money, right? Because most people like to watch basketball. They love football as well. Football probably more than basketball being watched. But as far as revenue generated, college NCAA March Madness generates the most money because I think people get attached to their alma maters. People get attached to their college teams. They've been watching particular athletes since they were high school. They came into college, and it's something that's really, close enough to where they can be relatable, right? Because you see somebody that you may have went to high school with, or you knew they went to your high school, or something to that effect, right? And you're in the same category as them. You played on the team, or maybe you played after them, and there's a possibility that you could go on to the next level, okay? All right. So another change that's affecting collegiate athletics is the formation of the Power 5 conferences, right? And so as you start to create these new conferences, right, these conferences get reorganized, we're talking about different dollars, right? From sponsorship deals, from broadcasting deals, right? From CBS, Fox, ESPN, all these universities get all these big deals so that their games can be broadcasted, right, on a particular network, so that network can attract those viewers. And then between there, they're getting sponsorship dollars from, Gatorade, Ford. Everybody that wants to put a commercial, during the broadcast is giving them money for space, for ad time, okay? And so that's kind of how that works, right? And so the big powerhouse schools, when each particular sport will, have different contracting rules, or they might do it per conference, okay? So the ACC or the SEC, for football, will have, probably one of the largest, deals, right? Broadcasting deals, right? And so they get a good chunk of change from that, okay? All right. So the economics of sports, economics of basically anything, right? Scarcity, is always a key component of, generating revenue, right? If you have scarcity, that means there's not a lot of it, okay? And people are willing to pay when there's not a lot, right, of something. When there's a high demand, right, but low supply, you create scarcity, right? And so in that, you can kind of, manipulate the price or the cost of something to, a point where, only certain people can afford it. But if you really want it, there's a huge demand, and you can kind of, determine or call your own price, okay? All right, economic interaction, right? When we're talking about how certain things kind of, meet and they impact on each other, okay? Let's just say, for instance, the weather and ticket sales, right? And I'm talking about ticket sales like maybe at the gate ticket sales, right? That may be impacted by the weather, right? So you have kind of economic interaction there. Or maybe, we have we're in a recession, or maybe we're having, a boom, right? And people are doing well, making money, and there's more money to spend. And so you might see an increased attendance in, at the Lakers games for a certain type of seat, right? For floor seats, or maybe lower level seats that they typically wouldn't have gotten. Or you see a decrease in people that are looking for VIP or floor level seats, right? Because of the economics of what's going on, okay? So you have two areas of study: macroeconomics and microeconomics, right? I'm not necessarily going to get into too much of the macro. Micro, it's just macro, of course, is the big, overview of, economics. And then micro, we talk about more into the community, and more talking about, behavior of producers and the consumers, right? So model describes how markets operate. So my supply demand model, demand and law of demand, supply and law of supply, market equilibrium, market surplus and shortage, right? So all these things, really, we're looking at supply, demand and supply, demand, however you want to look at it, right? But we're looking at, okay, at what point do we have the ample supply to satisfy the demand and not have any surplus, right? We don't want surplus. Surplus is waste, right? Especially if it's something that's perishable. And, if we don't get rid of it at a certain time, it becomes, obsolete, or it becomes, a waste, okay? So we have to get rid of it, right? So we're trying to reach market equilibrium, right? We're trying to make sure that we are in a place where we have just enough. Maybe we don't necessarily meet all of them, but we meet most of it, right? We don't ever necessarily want to go above too much because we don't want to have surplus, because surplus again means cost, right? Means money, and be it inventory, security, whatever the case may be, or just unable to use, right? It's like a coupon that's expired or a voucher that's expired, right? For us, that's a bad deal, but for the person that issued it, it's good, right? Because they didn't provide a service, but they got the payment. Okay. So sports events bring a substantial amount of economic activity, which we talked about earlier. Spending simulates local economies, right? Because it's just not about going to the sporting event. It's about the food that's going to get eaten. It's about the drinks that are going to be eaten. It's about the gas that needs to be consumed to put the vehicles. It's about the parking fee that's going to be, paid. All right. It's about, all the other stuff that you're going to do with the kids, to keep them entertained. It's about the gear, the apparel that you're going to buy, afterwards, right? It's about the tickets that you're going to buy for the next game because you have such a great time, this time, right? And so there's different aspects when you look at, the impact, the economic impact of sports, okay? And how it really contributes to an economy and how it can, at the end of the day, at a macro level, right, be a job provider, all right? When we look at, what a sports team, how many people they employ and who they employ, it's a lot of people. Right? There's a lot of people who bring a lot of money, and those people are going to take their monies when they make their money, their salary, they're going to spend it in the economy. They're going in the local economy, right? And so that's an important aspect. When you look at that, at the the revenue and economic impact of sports, right? You want to, understand what's going on. So you want to collect information on spending patterns of visitors, right? You want to, really look at different challenges and obstacles that, that the economy of sports, has, right? As far as I said, disagreements in contracting, excuse me, the scalping of tickets, right? Counterfeit tickets, people getting duped into buying fake tickets, and then, they're out of pocket now. How do you control that? How do you control, the proliferation of, fake apparel? How do you create contracts with Nike, Reebok, Adidas, specifically for your team? There's a lot of different things that can be impacted economically, okay? So when you talk about, sports research, you should ask, who conducted the research and how is the research conducted? Right, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, right? The collection of data, right? The analysis of data, and then the representation or the presentation of the data, okay? But if you're doing research, you really want to look at, as someone who's not doing research and you're reading a piece of information, you want to see who conducted the research, right? Who did it, right? Was it done by a group? Was it done by an individual? Was it done by the organization, right? Because that gives you motive, that gives you intent, that gives you an idea of, okay, if it was done by the organization, there may be some bias in there that is leaning towards more favorable perception of the organization. Once it was done by an external entity, they will be more objective, right? They're just going to lay it out how it is, and how was the research conducted? Was it done via questionnaire? Was it done via, interview, right? One-on-one focus groups or that kind of thing, right? How do we collect the information, right? And that has an important, role, because if it's primary data, then we know that there may be some interpretations of the data that, give us a better understanding of the data. Whereas secondary data, I'm just using data that someone else collected for another purpose, and I'm hoping it fits, but it may not, all of it may not fit necessarily to what I'm looking for, okay? Overview of financial management functions fall into two areas: what to do with current financial resources and how to procure additional financial resources. Key roles of the financial manager: determine how much money the organization will need to meet long-term obligations, and determine how the organization will procure those funds. All right. So when you talk about financial management, we're looking at, how are we spending the money and how do we get more money, right? Business development. Okay. How do we start to get more sponsors? How do we, increase our sponsorship contracts that we already have? How can we, increase the price or the cost of a ticket in order to, increase our revenue, right? Or how do we spend our money on a particular player, right? What's our long-term outlook, looking like when it comes to providing certain contracts to certain players, right? And how big the contracts are, and how do we amortize those contracts over time, all those things, right? What's the financial impact going to be on our payroll, right? On the salary cap, and those kind of questions, right? That's really what we're talking about when we talk about financial management. All right. Understanding, certain things, balance sheet and income statement, be able to read those things, the profit and loss statement, P&L, be able to read those things is important, right? As a manager, just as, as a person, especially if you have large sums of money, you have an accountant or a CPA, you need to be able to read a balance sheet. You need to be able to understand the income statement, debits and credits, and just understand revenue, expenses, outgoing, incoming, accounts receivables, accounts payables, just basic accounting stuff, right? You have to understand that, right? Because if you don't, you're really not going to know where the money's going, what money's coming in, right? And who's actually getting paid, who's not getting paid, and who's, probably embezzling, right? Who's taking funds or manipulating the data to make it beneficial for them. So different sorts of revenue expenses for sports organization, okay? Depending on the type of sport, right? It could be geared towards sports participation, right? We're looking to, make a profit and focus on sports spectators, right? Really trying to see what we can get out of the spectator, right? There's a certain amount of money that we know we're going to be able to get from the sponsors and from, our distribution deals and broadcasting deals, right? But usually those are, fixed and are long-term, right? When we talk about the spectator and, generating revenue from ticket sales, those are things we can fluctuate, right? Because it really depends on, the local, environment or local community, depends on, the value of our team, depends on our payroll, depends on, attendance. It depends on a lot of things. So the price of the ticket and all the assorted or associated things is going to fluctuate and, can be increased or decreased, right? And we can, tier different things, like we said, have variable pricing, right? For different levels of seating, different packages, different things that we can offer, right? And so we can very well, increase or decrease our profits, right? By being able to control our revenues, right? And also, limit cost, right? Keep costs at a distance, okay? Some of the things as far as sources of revenue that I already talked about, game attendance, ancillary purchases, media rights, sponsorship, endorsement, and license, merchandise, right? All those things are sources of revenue for the organization that, they'll get paid out. And then not only that, individually as an athlete, right? They'll have their own separate contracts that will be exclusive with a particular brand that they'll get paid on an individual basis for being a spokesman or sponsor or, spokesperson, whatever the case may be, okay? Some expenses that are unique to the sports industry, of course, are the sports salary and cost of salary, right? Salaries are different when you talk about sports. Go on the average, the average, salary for a, NBA player, I think it's league minimum, I believe, is $450,000, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, for an NBA player, I think it's $450. I can't remember, but at the end of the day, the salary brackets are totally different than us regular working folks, right? Who are starting 60, 70, 80, and running into hundreds of thousands of dollars later on down the line as we mature and get experience, and depending on the responsibilities and roles of that particular job, right? Some careers in financial management, right? You can be financial management jobs, financial manager, excuse me, financial operations, consulting firms and professionals, kind of understanding what skills and education, are required, right? Having a bachelor's or master's degree in finance or contracting, understanding business operations, understanding sports management, that kind of thing, right? Maybe it's accountant, and depending on which department you're going to work in, right? You could be in the analytics department and not necessarily need any real understanding of the sport itself, right? But you understand the numbers, you understand what the numbers are saying, and then once you tell them what the numbers are saying, then the coaches and the managers, they understand what that means as it relates to, their decision making for the team or particular athlete, right? But there's different aspects, when it comes to the finances and the controlling of monies in the organization, and contracting is an important aspect of it, understanding value and evaluation methods. All right, so at this point, this concludes my presentation for this week. Again, make sure that you have all your week 6 stuff in, okay? I will take week 5 work. Yeah, I'll take week 5 work up to, tomorrow. Well, up to Monday. Yeah, up to Monday, the 13th, I will take week 5 work. And after that, the only thing I'll accept is week 6 work and week 7 work, of course. Okay. All right. Hope everybody has a great weekend. And I will see you next week.